Welcome back. My first guest is Clarkstown Town Assessor, John Noto. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me.
So, John, delighted to have you on. Again, you're going to enlighten all of our residents about everything they need to know about taxes. And as the old saying goes, there's nothing certain in life but death and taxes, right?
Exactly right.
So you're the guy that kind of brings taxes to our people. So we're going to speak about that. But seriously, there's an awful lot to learn. We're going to talk about what goes into making an assessment for taxing purposes for a piece of property. We're also going to talk about how people can check to make sure that their assessment is accurate and what the process is for people to be able to challenge it or grieve their taxes, if you will. But before we get to that, let's talk just a little bit about yourself. You've had a very varied and distinguished career as our town assessor, but just tell us a little bit about your background, how long you've lived in Clarkstown and what you did before you were town assessor.
Sure. I grew up in Clarkstown. I grew up on Little Tor Road. My parents had a real estate office right on Little Tor Road, and I grew up above it. And went to Clarkstown schools, St. Thomas Aquinas, was a finance major, and I guess I've been in real estate and valuation since I was probably 15 years old, measuring houses and doing all the legwork for my folks. But I was the county director of real property tax for 9 years, and 4 years before that, a position within that department. Gave a real good insight into property tax and how the law and the different segments of the law really affect the folks and property tax and the enforcement side. And I've gone in and out of government to the private sector to managing large commercial properties of 1.3 million square feet, to the brokerage side. Kind of had a lot of fun doing all of it, but coming back here to doing assessment work is actually more gratifying, working with the people. It's interesting. We're a real dynamic town. We have a tremendous amount of commercial and varied commercial with industrial, retail, the large retails, and a huge residential base. So it's an interesting town to work in as an assessor. It's my hometown, so I really enjoy working with the folks.
So just back when you were director of real property taxes, that was in the Vanderhoff administration. How long were you in that position for, roughly?
So about 9.5 years, and for 4 years before that, I was the real property. I think they call me the tax specialist.
Right. So as director of real property tax services, it was like an assessor equivalent. You were kind of the go-to person in the county for about 10 years under the Vanderhoff administration.
Correct. We would train, advise, counsel assessors on various different issues anytime they needed information or research on opinions of counsel or complex appraisal type valuation problems. They would come to us, and we would be a liaison with the state, or we would do the valuation in our office. It was a one-man show. We did a lot of the leasing and real estate work for the county, and also we were very involved in the lien enforcement side, which is the collection side of the property tax. As you know, when taxes get paid to the town, any uncollected taxes are collected by the county. The towns, school districts, special districts, all get reimbursed, made whole, and the county becomes a collecting entity and the enforcement entity.
Right. And prior to becoming the town assessor, you had been an elected official. You were a town councilman for a couple of years. You were also working as a deputy assessor, right, over in Westchester?
Correct. I was a deputy assessor in the city of Yonkers.
Right. Yonkers is what, the fifth largest city, fourth largest city?
Fourth largest city
in the state. So you really had some diverse, background as a deputy assessor in a city. So you work for a county, you work for a city, and kind of now to the present day, you've been our town assessor. How long have you been the assessor for?
About 2.5 years, going into the third year.
Okay, and it's got to be something being the assessor of a town like Clarkstown. We're the 10th largest town by population in New York State out of 932 towns. So we're a full-service town, a big town. I'm very proud of the level of services that we have, and we have a very diverse assessment office. One of the other things I think we were talking off camera, really, the rule of thumb is that for an assessment office and for the assessing function, really it should take about 2% of what your annual budget is. So, but your budget is considerably less than that, which really shows some real efficiencies that is being done. What's the proportion of your budget, compared to the town budget?
So we're, I think, about 6.7% of the town budget, which we have about 9 employees total. We're
You mean 0.67%?
0.67%.
Right.
Yeah,
Not
sorry,
6.7.
not 6.7, right?
No,
That-
it was just-
that would be quite the opposite of being
Yeah.
good.
Right.
But and with that staff, we were 14 in Yonkers with 38,000 parcels. We're 9 here with 28,000 parcels. We have a significant, non-homestead class or the commercial class, and we're collecting in the last year about $26 million of new assessment, which goes to a lot of credit to my staff of getting out there, reviewing building permits, sales reviews, and so forth, and just being real proactive on collecting that new inventory. And that effort brings in additional assessment, which means the amount of money that falls to the property tax line, which gets distributed throughout the town, is now spread out more by that $26 million in assessment, which eases the burden on everybody as taxes, incrementally come up.
Right, and so part of that additional assessment is new development that takes place. So we have things like coming through the planning board, smaller subdivisions. We have new commercial being developed, and that happens. But a lot of that 26 million is really exactly what you talked about, something that really hadn't happened here. We didn't have the departments really communicating and talking the way that they need to. And so when somebody files for a building permit, as that's moving through the process, as those inspections take place, your office then becomes involved, and then you're able to go out and check on the property status, and if there's value that's been added to the property, to make sure that the assessment properly reflects that, and then that drives additional value. So if consequently, if somebody develops a new commercial building, well, obviously that's going to be taxed differently than if it was a vacant piece of property, and then that spreads out that value, additional value, goes across the entire class of all the property owners. So that's one way in which, from new value, that you can really kind of keep the impact of any tax increases low. Correct?
Absolutely correct. Yes.
And I'm very proud of the fact that in my time as supervisor, we've seen a real significant rise in value. Last year was 26 million. The year before that was over 20 million. So over the last 3 years, we've seen real big jumps, and it's not all from new development. It's really just us being a lot more efficient, and you talking with the other town departments, particularly the building department, and sharing of information, so that we can catch things that are missed, and that we can make sure things are added to the tax rolls in an appropriate manner. So John, let's talk a little bit about how does an assessment get made? You talked about 2 different types of properties. So just describe those 2 different types of properties and how, what goes up into what puts one property in one class or another class. Maybe you could speak to that. And then how do we determine an assessment on a piece of property?
Sure. So there's 2 classes of property. There's the homestead class and the non-homestead class. And the easy way to look at it is 1, 2, and 3 family homes are in the homestead class. Everything else goes into the non-homestead class, with the exception of some vacant land, residential vacant land, that can be used for that residential purpose. So really 1, 2, and 3 family homes, homestead. Everything else in the non-homestead. And that's the way it breaks down. Our percentage of those 2 classes is approximately right now 28% of our properties fall into the non-homestead. Everything else is in our residential side, if you will, and that's approximately 72%. So our roll value is about $4.2 billion, which comes out to a full value of about $14 billion. So we have a lot of value in town. The way we establish an assessment is assessments are based on market value. Now, our last reval was done in 1985, and assessments were set at that time. So all our values, when you look at our assessment roll, will be based on values at that time, which means it were about 29, say 30% of value, right? Which means a $100,000 parcel is assessed at $30,000, because back in 1985, it would have been worth $30,000, and over time, we've come up to that $100,000. So that equalization rate, we work with the state to establish that. We do segments of the town to establish what the sales, the market value to assessment is, and we come up with that equalization rate. And that's what, how we drive it. So when we look at new property, we look at what the market value is, and we back it down to that valuation date of 1985. And that's done by equalization rate.
So let's move into kind of the calendar, right? So tell us how the assessing year works. So taxable status day is March 1st, and people have the ability then to look at, what the value of their property is. They can grieve it, which takes place in May. And then, the ultimately established, everything's, finalized by July. So walk us through how that looks, and then I want to get to the process. If somebody wants to look at their property and evaluate it, they want to look at their assessments and how people can do that.
Sure. It's a really important point is what our tax calendar is, because it's set by state law. So, and pretty much everything that we do is done by state law. So, like you said, March 1 is taxable status date. So that's whatever condition the property's in and the condition of ownership, whether it's owned by, George Holman or, Corporation S. As of March 1, we record it as the ownership, and that stays for the full year, right? So then we're looking at, from March 1, we see what exists, and we're putting a value on that that's going to be tentative for May 1. So May 1's our tentative roll. The value, and this is what gets confusing, the value is as what the value was of whatever existed on March 1 as of the prior July. So that's the date you're evaluating it for. So then you put your tentative roll out, and that tentative roll, May 1, is a real significant date for the property owner, because then they can come in and inspect our roll, which means take a look at their assessment and see if we have it right. Most people have a pretty good idea of the value of their home. They're pretty in tune with the market. So they can look and say, does the assessor have me right or not? They look at their inventory, they compare it to what they have at home, and they say, he's right, there's 2.5 baths, there's 4 bedrooms, or there's really only 1.5 baths, he's got that wrong, and I need to address that. And that time between May 1 and the 4th Tuesday in May, that's when it can be an open discussion between the property owner and my office to make sure we have your assessment right. And we call that our informal review period. And it's really important. Something that a few assessors do, this is going into your next point, is we allow for an informal review before a homeowner would have to go to the Board of Assessment review. So that's important. But going back to the calendar, May 1 is that tentative roll date, and then July 1 is the final roll date. So the 4th Tuesday in May, the property owner, if they disagree with our assessment, can file with that Board of Assessment review, an independent body that's not attached to us. It's appointed by the town board over the course of years. So they're all citizens hearing other citizens' complaints on their assessment, and they make a determination whether the assessment should be changed or remain the same. They can't raise it. They can't, they can only lower it or leave it alone. So then whatever their determination is, July 1, it's final, and we use that July 1 value, our final roll date, to set up the school bill that comes up in September and the town bill that comes out in the following January.
Right. So it really is kind of a process. Now, there can always be an informal review, and I know you've done that at any time during the course of the year, correct?
Yes, I think last year we did about 80 informal reviews. And the nice part about that is, we have 28,000 parcels. We're not going to be right on every single parcel just by the nature of time from when that roll was done in 1985 to today. There's going to be, outliers that are not going to fall within that 30% of full value. So we say, our job is to get it right, to make sure everybody's equitably assessed and that they pay their fair share and no more in taxes. So that's what we do. Checks and balances is for the individual property owner to come in and say, I'm going to look at it. So in this, now what we do, and it's on our website, you can ask for an informal review or just email our office, and we'll schedule it so that we'll take a look at it. We'll put together comparable sales. And if we see there is a difference, we'll call the homeowner or property owner, and we'll discuss the value. And if we can agree, we'll stipulate to the correct assessment, where the property should be assessed. And it's really effective, and it also gives transparency. And what it really does is there's a lot of tax reps, those letters you get in the mail, that are going to take 30 to 50% of your first year savings. We'll take a look at it for you. If you have a case, we're going to settle it. You get to keep that savings.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think people really understand that. You know, one of the things we've done, certainly since you've been assessor, is we've really tried to increase that outreach. Hence the reason you're also on the show, because it gives the opportunity. Anybody seeing this, if they want to have an informal review, they can contact your office. How do they get in touch with you?
My email is j.noto@clarkstown.org, or you can go to Assessor at Clarkstown at clarkstown.org. Go on our website. There's a box, toolkit, homeowners toolkit. Click on that. You can fill out the informal review request there. There are a number of ways. Call us. However you want to get a hold of us. We're willing and we're open to that review, because we want the taxpayer to know that it's not us against them. We're all in it to get the correct assessment. And that's really important for folks to know. There should be no intimidation for somebody to walk into our office and have a question.
Right.
Because it's a big burden, our property tax. We all pay it. And to know what our taxes are based on, it's really important. And to be comfortable that you're paying the right number.
Right. So ultimately what it comes down to, John, is that people will always have the ability to do an informal review of their property through the assessor, and can ask questions, and there are some instances where upon that, if there's been an issue that's been raised, where the taxes could actually be lowered for a property, correct?
Correct. So,
and you've had that happen, certainly through some of these reviews that have taken place.
yes, if we see there's a difference between where it is and where it should be, we make the change. Both parties sign off on a stipulation, and we make that change.
Right. And folks have that ability. So a lot of people actually, particularly in the lower Hudson Valley, all the municipalities, homeowners are constantly getting, bombarded with little postcards or things about, we'll help you, you're paying too much in taxes, we'll help you, reduce your assessment. And to work with those companies, they'll often, folks will get the promise of, we'll reduce your taxes, get a reduction, and just by dumb luck or sheer luck of it, folks may be overassessed, and based upon what the market conditions are and the condition of the house. And you don't need to go to a third party. You can actually do it on your own, and it's simply by just providing the information. So hopefully a lot of people will reach out to be able to check their assessments through your office. Let's finish up, because we're about out of time, but let's finish up with, all right, let's say you go through that process and somebody agrees their taxes, or commercial entity agrees their taxes and they're unhappy. So they can actually then go for afterwards with the tax cert. Maybe you could discuss that process as well for us.
Sure. So it's all pursuant to real property tax law. So you have the Board of Assessment review. You file the fourth Tuesday in May. You get a determination, yes or no. If it's a no, and you're in that homestead class and you're an owner-occupied property, you can go to the small claims assessment review. Informal, a hearing officer hears your case, and it's for the single-family home or 2 or 3 family home. If you're a commercial entity, a non-homestead, or you rent out your property, so you're not a owner-occupier, then you can go to what's called an Article 7 proceeding. It's like a Supreme Court action reserved for property tax matters, right? So you need an attorney. It's a formal process. You file your petition with the court, and the court schedules you for hearings and so forth. And in between that time, us and the property owner have time to establish our values and see if there's some room to move on either side, which we would settle, or we're just, we know it's accurate. They think they've got a case, and we end up going to court, and it gets adjudicated by the judge.
Right. And we do have some larger property owners that file tax certs, throughout the years, and those typically will go for multiple years, just because of the way the court calendar is, and will often require, some expenditure of resources on the town's part. Correct?
Correct. And it's, everybody thinks it's an evil thing that property owners, they sue the town for an Article 7. It's really good property management. If you own commercial property and you're looking at one of your biggest annual expenses, you want to make sure, just like the informal review or the Board of Assessment review, you want to make sure you're paying the right amount of money. And commercial is a little bit more complicated in terms of establishing value. So we end up a lot of times in the Article 7 proceeding, and it's just normal course of business. We're used to it. We do it well. We look at it, and we'll settle a lot of these cases, as the board has seen, before we ever get to, a judge having to try a case.
Right.
But, again, our values are pretty good, even on a commercial side, and we feel pretty comfortable that, like anything else, 80-90% of your values are good, 10% are over, 10% are under. It's just the nature of having, 1,400 commercial properties and having an assessment roll from 1985, which has held up through the equalization rate to be real reflective of value.
Right. So, John, I want to thank you, you making this clear for us. It's a fine point, but it's an important point that people need to understand, because really it's at the basis of the funding of all levels of government, town government, school government, county government, the taxing districts like fire districts, or water districts, sewer districts. It's all based on a value of a piece of property and the amount of taxes that are paid, proportionally across all of those areas. So really, you're the guy that kind of makes sure that the engine is moving in the right direction and trying to protect homeowners' rights, property owners' rights, as well as ensuring that people are paying, their fair share in terms of the taxes for the property. So it's really kind of a key office. In some parts of the state, in some parts of the country, the assessor is actually more of a political position, where there can be an elected position. Here it's an appointed position, and you're appointed, for a term. How many years is your term again?
All assessors throughout the state are a 6-year term.
Right, and you're in the beginning of a 6-year term now, right?
Right. I originally was filling out the balance of a 6-year term, and now I'm into the first of 6 years right now.
Right. So, John, thank you so much. If folks want to get in touch with you, how do they contact you again?
My email address is j.noto@clarkstown.org. You can call my office at 639-2031, and we have a staff that's ready and waiting to hear from you.
Right, and hopefully lots of folks watching this will be able to reach out and check the value of their property, either commercial or residential. About how many tax claims or tax certs, small claims items do we have per year roughly?
We run on average, about 2,000 Board of Assessment review petitions every year. This year, we're about 25% down on our, the residential, the SCAR petitions, which are about 600 or 800. And we have about, if you take all your condo units, because they're grouped as individual, but they're one filing, about 235 commercial filings that are this year that go onto the docket for an Article 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's there's an awful lot of folks, and a lot of times when people will grieve their taxes, commercials, it'll be multiple years because of the length of time to be able to get through the process, correct?
Correct. On the commercial properties. Residential, we usually settle within the year.
Within the year.
Yeah.
Great. Well, John, thanks again. Really appreciate it, and hopefully you'll have a lot of input from our residents looking to check out their taxes and make sure that they're assessed fairly.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from them. Thank you.
Thanks. And we'll be right back. Stay tuned.